All right, welcome. I'm Cindy Bensley Gertz, the creator of Conscious Living Arts, the Vibrant Woman Program, and Inspired Menopause. Welcome to my series, Vibrant Voices. So last year in 2021, I did a series featuring 6 of my students. This year, I'm interviewing my fellow business women. I have discovered that 75% of the clients that I work with are business owners themselves. And in business, we say that 90% of working on your business is working on yourself. So I'm offering these interviews this year as a service to the women that I teach, that I inspire, and hopefully that they'll find these stories inspiring as well. So make sure that you listen to the end of our interview because there will be a gift for tuning in. So I'm here today with my good friend and colleague, Leslie Ellis. Leslie is a yoga teacher, a yoga therapist, a soul-based coach, and founder of Heart Song Yoga Sanctuary. Welcome, Leslie.
Hello. Thanks, Cindy. I'm so really honored that you asked me to talk with you today, and yeah, that I get a chance to share with your community. And I also just want to say, like, it's really cool. Like 75% of the people that you are working with now are business owners.
Yeah.
Um, and it's so important because I've been in a lot of circles with business owners, but they're not always self-care circles. So I love that you have business owners that are doing their own personal self-care because it's so important.
Yeah, right. It was like really a surprise to me when I sat down and I
Yeah.
looked at who am I working with? Oh my gosh, 3/4 of the women I'm working with own their own business. And, it's either their main income or a substantial
Yeah.
amount of their family's income. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm so glad you're here too. And I'm so honored. I'm so excited to have you share your story with my community. And our theme today is stories, and we each have a story. Each of these women who is a business owner, we have a story about how we got here. So that's where I would love to start. I would love to hear your story. How did your own healing journey inform the choice to build this business of yoga, Heart Song Yoga Sanctuary?
Yeah. Hmm. How long do we have?
Oh, about 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, so encapsulated version. I've been practicing yoga for almost 35 years. I was thinking about it earlier, almost 35 years. I have Yoga has been like a major element of my life. And I've been teaching for nearly 25 years. So part of my story is thank God I found yoga when I was 24 years old. When people were saying to me like Leslie, have you ever thought about getting a massage? Or Leslie, do you know anything about yoga? Clearly, I was like this very stressed out young woman. I had a stressful job and a lot of past trauma, a history of family that we could say was not the very most functional, a lot of things. And thank God I found yoga because it really, like, it was a turning point, like the major turning point, that very first yoga class that I took. So that's a huge hub of the healing journey. And then from there, it's just, I've gone in many different directions, lots of healing modalities that I've used, but yoga is the one that I come back. Like I just said, it's a hub. I come back to it over and over, and I decided to teach. So I did start to teach, and then not too long after that, quit my healthcare job. I'm an occupational therapist. I'm still a licensed occupational therapist, but I haven't practiced specifically for a long time. Um, I quit my job and I opened a yoga studio. So, Heartsong Yoga Sanctuary is like the next iteration of what was Heartsong Yoga and Wellness Center. in Beaverton, Oregon. I ran that studio for many years, and for a number of reasons in 2015, I closed the studio. I moved to a new town, and I had this image, like this vision of I want to have, like, again, a space where community can come together. But I knew I didn't want to have a yoga studio. You know, there's so many yoga studios, and that wasn't it. In fact, I really I was working online more and really loving that, and loving having a more sort of expansive reach to a wider community, not just the people who lived in one town. And, in one town, I'm not sure exactly where it is, where everybody is at, but in the town where I lived, it's like there was a yoga studio on every other block or so. So it's not only the people who live in town, but the people who happen to find you. So I had this image, this vision. I wasn't quite sure exactly what that meant. And then, like so many people's stories, because this is another like big turning point for many of us, the pandemic.
Right.
And suddenly there were more people who were needing support and willing to go online, people that I already knew. So there's a whole world out there online, right? But people I already knew were suddenly like, oh, yeah, online, let's try that. And so, yeah, Heart Song Yoga Sanctuary came with the foundation of a desire, but then in a flash, as a download. I think of it like a spirit download of like, oh, and you'll have the sanctuary. It's going to be called the sanctuary, and this is what's going to happen, and blah, 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 blah. And I kind of wrote it all down, and then I told people about it, and now it exists.
Yeah. Right. And it's interesting because you know, you write down a story and it manifests, right?
Yes.
So our own stories and entwined probably about 10, maybe a little over 10 years ago. So of those 25 years, I've known you for quite a substantial amount
Yeah.
of that time. And we, in getting to know each other in all these years, we've discovered that we share this love of story, mythology. Mythology is an evolving story, right? And
Yeah.
intuition and energy and everything soulful and spiritual. So I know that you sometimes refer to yourself as a practical mystic. So tell us more about that. Like, what does that mean? And what do your students receive from you in the Heart Song Yoga Sanctuary as a practical mystic?
Well, it does definitely have to do with that um, love that we both have of myth, story, and mystery. And I mean, one thing I could say just about story in general, and then I will answer your question, but just story in general. In a lot of the circles that I've been in, there's a lot of discussion about like you have to like get over your story, quit telling the same old stories over and over, like forget that old story and just live in the present, live in the now. And there are parts of that that I think could be good advice, because sometimes people do get mired in a story and it becomes a self-limiting belief. At the same time, the stories of what we've done and how we've become who we are really, really important. The thing about mythology is that these are like primordial stories that can help to inform us about our own experience. So it's a lived experience that we've had because of so many things: culture, family, belief systems, all of that. Our stories, we perceive them like with a limited view. So these primordial, metaphorical, mythological stories, they can help to open up our perspective and let us see something else about what it is that we've come through, and help us to then like move, you might say, like through the eye of the needle into the vastness of what's possible. And that is Maybe I did just answer your question. That's why I'm the practical mystic. That's how I view things. It's like there is this amazing mystery that's awaiting us. And to move into that mystery, we don't necessarily have to like shed everything that we have been before. At the same time, we have to be willing to like relax the how it limits us, how it holds us back, how it keeps us from doing what we really are here and meant to do.
Yeah.
I'm also very practical. I'm a very grounded person. I can talk woo with maybe not the best of them. I was going to say the best of them, but there's a lot of more woo people than I am. But I can talk in the woo world, right? But I'm very practical. It's part of why yoga, I think, is my modality. And when I say yoga, I don't mean just yoga asana, though that's part of it. I mean like the whole vast, like the more of yoga. At the same time, yoga really does encourage us to be embodied, to be physically present, to know where our bodies are in space, to feel, sense, and know ourselves through the body. This is the practice of Hatha Yoga. And in that, there is a practicality in that because we're here, we're humans, right? And there's a lot of spiritual practice that I think you could almost perceive like, oh, what I'm supposed to do through my spiritual practice is somehow transcend this experience of who I am and what brought me here. Going back to story, right? Like get rid of the story and like be something else, be enlightened, be something other than what you are. And the practical thing, when you actually live in a human body and you're like, oh, yeah, I want my spiritual practice to be me taking a walk with the dog, me washing the dishes, me being in an argument with my partner because he's a jerk sometimes. And so am I. You know, it's like that's the practical part. It's like, let's be real about the fact that we're human. And let's open up that we are boundless beings, that we have actually no idea of what potential that we have. And then we play with the balance of those.
Yeah, yeah. I love everything you're saying. And I was reminded, I'm relating to it too, and reminded of when I first started yoga, the whole idea of getting rid of your story, like, oh, don't pay any attention to the story. And at the same time, we're taught in yoga to be present with what is, and our story is what is. And the suffering comes right when we either push it away too much or we grasp onto it too much. So it is a beautiful thing that we do in our circles where our students are witnessing each other's stories and they're just being
Yeah.
present with the story. And from that is coming great insight that
Yeah.
then they can use practically in their lives. So I know that you wanted to share a myth with us today. So please tell us like which myth you're going to share and why you're drawn to sharing this myth with us. And how can myths help us transform our own stories?
Mhm. Yeah. I just have to say, I just have to. I want to say one thing about something that you just said, Cindy, and that is that piece of like being present in the moment. And yet many of us on this path of yoga or spiritual practice, meditation, have been taught like to be present in the moment. You do have to push away or like kind of get away from whatever's coming. Even meditation practices, and this might seem a little heretical to some people, but meditation practices where, you know, you notice the thought and turn your attention back to the breath. You notice this, that's a sound, you label it sound, and you turn your attention back to the breath, and you just keep coming back and back and back. It's helpful to a degree, but it's not very functional because when you are in life, things are happening. And so my practice really is about, can I be present in the moment with what's happening? Not, oh, just a minute, I need my breath. Now I'm present. Like as soon as I open my eyes, it's like, oh no, I see your ugly face again, and I'm not present anymore. I have to close my eyes and feel my breath. Like that's what I mean by it's not functional. Maybe that's kind of the practicality part too. Is so it can be a good practice because it is helpful for us to train the mind, but it's not like the ultimate practice. So um, the myths, I think one of the things that they do for me is sort of, like I said earlier, like give like a different perspective about what's happening. And the thing I love about mythology and what that, so my teacher is like, oh, she's a beautiful storyteller and shares goddess myths. She's a different teacher than the one that you and I met under, but that was also a place our teacher um, taught some of the goddess stories, and they're enthralling because of how you can see yourself in them, and also how we might resist seeing ourselves in them. So my current teacher, when she tells the story, when she tells the myth, she always is reminding me, us, every part of the myth is you. Every part of the myth is you, and this is how they're helpful. So say, and I do love the goddess myth, so there's the goddess Durga, who is a great mother goddess and also kind of a warrior goddess. And if you just say like, okay, there's the goddess, like she is, and she is me. And I don't mean like, the Instagram, I'm the goddess with all the scarves and veils and all of that. But no, really like, okay, what does that mean in my life if this manifestation of spirit, which is what all the parts of these spiritual myths are, any myth really, like if that's me, what can I take from that? So Durga, her story, one part of her story, or one story of her, is comes from a time when the world was in chaos, and the gods and the demons, and you have to think like demon is not like evil, right? It's Daemon. If we spell it in English or in Roman, never mind. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like we spell it out, but it's not evil. Because of what happens, we could construe it as humans as, good and bad, preferred and not preferred, light and dark, all of those things. But I think it's helpful to step back, because then we don't get so caught up in like, ooh, I don't want to like own the bad part of myself or the evil part of myself. No, it's like more spacious than that. So the gods and the demons were trying to like were at odds to who was going to be in control of the world, and they had like gotten so into this thing. And I'm going to tell a little my own version, but basically the goddess was like, all right, well, nobody's paying any attention to me, so I'm out of here, and said on her way out like, hey, if you need me, call, I'll come back, but for right now I'm out of here. And she left. So they're at their thing. The world is in chaos. Things are really falling apart. Those two parts of the story are me. They are you. I mean, you think about all of the times where the part that really wants to, sustain life and move forward and does have more of that brightness, and the part that does hold you back and doesn't want things to evolve and actually has some destructive tendencies, which both are part of nature. So again, neither's right or wrong, good or bad, but they're both there. And when they're at odds, you feel really stuck, right?
Mm.
So the gods were feeling really stuck. They're like, crap, what am I gonna do here? Nothing's happening. We're not like not making any headway, and things are really falling apart. It's not good. And somebody remembered, like, hey, didn't that chick, the goddess, say she'd come back if we called? The practical mystic is also very irreverent.
I was just
Look,
thinking that, but I love the way you're telling this story. So please keep going.
and so they called, and she did come, and it's important part of the story that she had left and she came back. And I could make a lot out of that, but we all have masculine and feminine. And the masculine is more that like action oriented, getting things done, structured, linear, all really, really good qualities. But they don't sustain life by themselves. We also need more of the like free flowing, more of the creative, more of the emotional, more of the sensitive, in order to come together and like move forward in life as a whole being. So the gods were stuck in part because they're trying to do everything the masculine way, right? So when they call back the feminine, suddenly they're calling back a part of the whole self that allows things to flow and allows good to like to shine and
Mm.
life to be sustained and to held up.
I
Um,
love that. That's really really beautiful. And when you talk about bringing things back to the whole and bringing the feminine back in, creating this balance, it makes me think of the midlife women that we work with, that
yeah,
we're in this place. It's very messy, it's very wild, there's a lot of unknown. And it's also a time to take pause and reflect and look back on your life, look back on your stories, and really a portal and an opportunity to move into the second half of life and perhaps create your own story.
yeah,
And so, what would you say to the women out there who are ready for that, who are ready to create their own story, or they want to know how to change their story, but they don't know where to start?
yeah,
How can a woman recognize that she's ready for this work?
yeah. I mean, so many ways, but one that comes right to me is that most of us have grown up in a time, and it still is this way, where the masculine still is prevalent. I mean, we're talking a lot about the patriarchy and all of that, and I think that there are some cultural structures that are at least starting to untangle a little bit. So part of, for all of us as women, and I think midlife women have especially potent, is a time of potency and great possibility to really like own that. Where have we got stuck in action orientation, do, even
Yeah.
if it's service of the heart? The women that I know and my own history as well has been like to push that service forward. And so, one thing for us to do is call back the goddess. And I don't mean that in the way like you have to do goddess myths, or that it has to be a um, religious or even spiritual kind of thing, although to me it just is. But to call back the feminine, to really like presence your heart, to allow yourself the depth of feeling that you have, to go into your woman's body. And I know, like, as much body positivity conversation as there is in the world, so many women still struggle so much with loving the body. And I hear it all the time. I just hear it all the time. The little comments that women say about themselves, even if they profess great body positivity and acceptance of all and all of that, the self-talk and the talk to other women about their own bodies, it just shows like this place where we still have a lot of work to do on that, to like love the body. So one thing that I would say is like do this practice like love your body. Like, and
Yeah,
I tend to be silly and
love
I
it.
kind of get into a little goofiness if that helps you, but it could also be very sensual. Like self-touch is a beautiful practice. And sexual self-touch, yes, but also just like loving, nurturing, kind
Right.
self-touch.
Yes.
Touching, stroking your own hair. Remember when you're like
Mhm.
um, maybe if you had children or a mother, like stroking the hair actually is a really loving gesture. Do that to yourself. You can see, like, I stroke my hair all the time. That's why it looks like this. uh, no, but
Right. And it's like, it makes me think of like, it's a self of like a form of self petting and, you
yeah.
know, 15 minutes of that and you're releasing those oxytocin hormones,
Yeah.
right? The relaxation
Yeah.
hormones.
Yeah, and so you're releasing those relaxation hormones, oxytocin, also by just like stroking your face. So if you do it, like stroke your face, stroke your throat, you're also stimulating your vagus nerve. So
Ooh,
this is again, I'll tell you, practical mystic. This is not just like some nice, fluffy kind of like, oh yeah, I'll do self-love. It's physiologic, scientific. All right, get your feet on the ground, your butt in a seat, and like touch your body because it will actually help your nervous system too.
right.
So,
It reminds me of a couple of things. When I was healing from my surgery, my own story, just the light touch across the skin that you taught me to bring the fibers back
oh
together to
yeah,
heal. And then I have a massage therapist who does this kind of light touching to help move the lymph.
yeah, yeah,
Just so many practical health benefits,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
for
it has the emotional and the spiritual and the mental well-being as part of it.
yeah. So I'd love to say one other thing about Durga,
Please.
and that is, I think that sometimes we can construe like, oh, calling back the feminine, calling back the emotional, calling back sensitivity, and all of that is somehow softening. And I think softness actually is very helpful. Think about a woman's body is more soft than like the more angular male, like stereotypical male body.
Mhm.
But when Durga comes back, she comes in riding on a tiger, in some stories, a lion, like a sleek, lithe feline. So, like allowing your own self, like to move like that, there's a power. Think about how a tiger moves. If you watch a tiger move or any of the big cats, you would be, well, if you're anything like me, like enthralled with like the ripples of muscle and the way that the cat moves, and even the ear, the way that it flips, and the way the tail goes, and like all of it, right? So you could think, how is my woman body like able to move with power? And sensitivity and emotion is a power. It's a superpower to connect in to that.
Love that.
It's a superpower that's missing in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
it's not missing in the world. It's gone underground like the goddess, waiting for us to call it back. Waiting for us to call it back and to honor it and to say like, we need you. We need you. Come and
Mhm.
help us.
Love
and it
that.
has that capacity to
Mm,
come and help us.
yeah. Which is a really nice segue into my next question, which is the benefits, like the far-reaching, long-lasting benefits when a woman, comes into her femininity and accepts this sensitivity and receptivity and becomes the writer of her own story.
Mhm.
What are those long-term benefits that you see?
Ah, I really believe that we are all here for a reason. And I don't mean like, your fate was mapped out ahead of time for you, but we're here for a reason. We have something unique. Absolutely, every single person, every single woman has something unique and important, vital to offer.
Mm,
And by calling oneself together, by doing the work and the exploration and the play and the rest that it requires to really connect to that whole, we start to get more and more glimpses and recognition of what it is in ourselves. And it doesn't have to be like a certain job or like a certain activity that you do or a particular kind of service. It's really just being yourself. That
mhm.
is the gift that you have to give and that you were born to give, and that it's your right to give and your responsibility to give. And yeah, so that's the far-reaching benefit is you get to do what the hell you came here for.
Right, right.
And it's fun. I find that exploration like fascinating and fun and hard and challenging and, you know, laying on the floor crying and screaming sometimes and sometimes feeling like exalted and excited. But that's another benefit is you get to experience more of what it is to be human, more of the range of possibility of what it is that you could experience. I think so many of us hold our experience here. We're like, okay, as long as I don't get to this or to that, I'm okay. And nobody will think I'm too much.
Oh, that's so interesting that you would say too much. I just went to a retreat last weekend and we were working on things like limiting beliefs. And I tend to hear women say, well, I don't have enough. I don't have enough time, resources, energy. I don't, there's not enough of me or I'm not enough. But there's also the other side of that, like where some women have experienced being too much and being chastised for being too much, too
Yeah,
big, too loud.
yeah,
And that was like really insightful for me to hear that. Like, oh,
yeah.
it can go the other way too, you know?
And also the women that you're talking about, when we get caught and it's not necessarily either this or that, right? Probably we all have a little bit of each of it. But if I'm caught in that place of I'm not enough, then where it comes is I want too much. And so we get, I want too much. I am too much. I talk too much. I'm too loud. I'm too sensitive.
Mm.
I'm too quiet. I'm too much of this, too much of that. I give too much. I'm too stingy. Like we have all these labels for us. And the labels, all they do is hold us back. And so the practice, I think, and the enthusiasm that I have for practicing and why I could stay with it for 35 years and more, I plan to continue to practice. And again, when I say yoga, I don't just mean yoga poses as part of it, but it's like yoga as life, really. The reason that practice is so sustaining and sustainable is because it's an exploration. and it's new all the time. And it helps me to gain knowledge about the very most important thing that I can have knowledge about in this life. And that is who I am, what I'm here for, what can I do for humanity. And the only way that I'm ever going to be able to do the most minuscule part of what's possible of what I could do for humanity is if I'm willing to do it for myself.
Mm.
So those are the far-reaching benefits. And they are far-reaching, right? And they might seem a little pie in the sky if you want to stay here. But if you can allow yourself to like relax and just let those boundaries like open up a little bit, you start to see, oh, there's more possible. I'm feeling things, I'm experiencing things, I'm knowing things that I didn't know before. Well, what happens out here? When you get there, it's like, ooh, what the hell happens out here? Like, yeah. And it's totally natural, I think, that we'll go, wow. And then we'll go, oh, wait,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so it becomes like this. It's a pulsation, just like life, just like nature. It all pulses, it shifts and it changes. It's bright and it's dark and it's dying and it's dying and it's living and it's birthing and anyway, yeah, you get it, right? It's a pulsation, and when we allow ourselves to move more in that pulsation instead of in that straight line, that also is a call to the goddess, because she sees like, oh, she's curious about that. Let me see, I'll go and help her.
So thank you, Leslie, for sharing that really rich story of Durga and your version of it and your excitement, enthusiasm for myth, for yoga, for self-care. It's just palpable. It comes through in the way that you tell a story, and I just love it. And I'm wondering if you have any last thoughts that you would like to share with our viewers, or if you're ready to tell them what you have going on and what gift you have for them today.
Yeah, yeah. I think a last thought just might be, um, don't discredit imagination and the things that you feel enthusiastic and passionate about, because they're keys to what's possible for you. I think sometimes we can think, oh, that's just like a daydream or it's a pipe dream. But spirit speaks in many, many ways. The goddess speaks in many ways. She can speak through, the random thought that you have, or the like little desire that comes up, but then you go like, oh no, not that. Like, what if you just held it in an open hand? Nothing that you suddenly think of, you have to go and do immediately. But as soon as you like open your hand and sit with it, it might evolve, right? But it is a way to write that story, and not just kind of keep closing the book like, no, not right now, no, not right now. Instead, like, oh, what is this? Who is this little character? How is it going to develop in this story? I
Yeah.
love telling stories.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that that's one of the things some of my students say, like, oh, I love when Leslie's going to do storytelling. um, so I'm actually going to, well, every month I do a free talk, and I would love to invite people who are watching this to come and join me for the next free talk. And if you're watching it before June 7th, the next June talk is called The Power of Story. And I'll probably tell maybe more of the Durga myth, because gosh, we just got like the very teeniest little part of it. There's so much more that happens in that story, and so much more that relates to the development of our own hearts and the recognition of our own souls and what we're doing here on Earth. So I'm going to talk a little bit more than we did today. This is a really beautiful start to it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this idea of um, where we've come from and how we can hold that story, not mire ourselves in it and hold ourselves back with it, but hold ourselves in that story and then envision ourselves into a new story using some from the myths to help to support that. This will be an hour session. It's free. I'm really excited. I do it on Zoom so that the people who come, we actually have a chance to chat a little bit. I always guide some kind of a practice. We're going to do some kind of envisioning practice, connect to the goddess somehow.
It
Later
sounds
this
really juicy.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. Later this fall, my sanctuary program will actually be exploring mythology even more deeply. Um, but this is going to be a little taste. Like I said, it's on June 7th, and it's at noon Pacific time. It's I always record it, so if somebody does sign up who can't make it at that time, they can receive the recording and still hear it, still connect with me that way. If you can't come live, it's always more fun because there's always some kind of sharing too. So there's people who are there have the opportunity to share their takeaways or questions or reflections. And that's a potent part of the sanctuary, which is really about community. And I know you also, it's like when we come together in circle, there's something magical that happens that doesn't happen when we're just sitting back by ourselves, like trying to figure it out. And it does work by recording, like the circle is still present, and we're always in the circle holding space for those who are watching, in addition to the ones who are physically present there. But there's an extra sort of layer that you get when you're part of holding that circle for the bigger circle. So I'd love to invite anyone to come and join me for that. And
Yeah. So how do folks sign up for that?
yeah, so we can put a link to sign up in the comments wherever this is
Yep.
out. It is on my website also, which is yogaheartsong.com. And yeah, I have a Facebook group as well called called Heartsong Yoga Soul Searchers. So a couple of ways to connect with me. Um, yeah, can we do that? Can we put the link in to sign up for it's
Yeah.
called Heartbeats Live. It might be a little confusing, but it's my my weekly newsletter gone live.
Yeah,
On
exactly.
Zoom.
As
Yeah.
you know, I do something very similar. So
Mhm.
yeah, this interview I'll be sending out in an email, and I'll be posting it in my group. And so in both places, I'll put the links so
Great.
that
And I'll send it
everybody,
out too.
yep.
Send it out too.
Yeah. And then if I put it on YouTube, I can put a little caption with the link. So that's where we'll put it. Yeah. So folks can look for it there. Yeah. Well, it
It's such a
sounds,
pleasure, such a joy. Like my heart is singing.
yeah, mine too. It's it's a fabulous gift you're offering to the community. And as I said, it's just been a really rich and deep experience. And I'm so grateful to you for spending some time with me today and sharing your story and sharing Goddess Durga's story
Mhm.
and letting women know how they can, write their own stories.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.